in different tranches to institutional investors. It's a way of scaling up the involvement of institutional capital in infrastructure, and something that we do very keenly with the objective of bringing clear sustainability standards into those asset markets. So that's illustrations of what we do. Let me finish by mentioning what I think are the two big obstacles to scaling up green finance. So as a bank, we are a supplier of green finance. And like many other suppliers in the space, we could actually do a lot more. We have the capacity to finance much more than we currently finance. So that means we have to look at the demand for green finance. And that's where we get to the challenges. And I want to highlight two. One is, and I think you've already alluded to it, supply of projects. You can't finance unless there's a project to finance. And viable, financially sustainable projects are hard to develop, hard to find. In particular in infrastructure, where projects have a big physical footprint, it's actually very hard to prepare good projects. Many infrastructure projects require land acquisition. Huge challenge in most countries, developing and developed countries, that lead to years and years of delay. Technical preparation of project takes time. Financial structuring to make sure every party gets the right slice of the risk allocated to them takes a lot of time and effort. So supply of projects is a very major issue and a very major constraint to green finance that we can provide. The second constraint and the second challenge lies in really government regulation, so to speak. The demand for green financing depends critically on the regulatory environment that project developers, companies face. The emission standards in a country determine what kinds of investments companies undertake and therefore what type of financing they require. If you have tight, well-enforced emission standards, you already have by design higher demand for green finance. In the carbon space, if you have a functioning carbon market or even requirement for compensation offsets of carbon emissions, then you actually generate the demand for green finance that isn't there if you don't have that government action. So I just want to draw the attention to that critical link between demand and supply for green finance. We can offer the supply, we can increase the supply, but unless those who operate on the demand side, and in particular governments, take the action to actually increase the demand for green finance, the market will not scale to the numbers that you correctly pointed out as the ambitions that we should have.
That's very comprehensive. Thanks for that. Dr. Kang, thanks for joining us online and for the patience waiting for your turn. Earlier in Q1 of this year, Bank of China collaborated with AIIB to issue sustainable development bonds. And the idea was to use those funds, like Joachim mentioned, for funding sustainable infrastructure. Now, could you share some of your success stories and some of the lessons that you've learned in terms of both raising the bond as well as deploying some of the proceeds that financial institutions from ASEAN can learn from?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. It's very glad to join from Hong Kong. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, as you said, this year alone, Bank of China has assisted worked together with Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank AIIB 2 times in successfully issuing sustainable bonds. These bonds are RMB or CNY dominated and has a total issuance of 4 billion yuan, around 566 million US dollar. So this kind of money allow onshore and offshore investors to invest in sustainable infrastructure projects under AIIB's Sustainable Development Bond Framework across the region. So as one of the most globalized Chinese banks, Bank of China has maintained a market-leading position in issuing cross-border green and sustainable bonds. I'd like to highlight one more successful issuance under the Belt and Road Initiative. In October this year, Egypt successfully issued a 3.5 billion RMB 3-year sustainable panda bonds. Bank of China acted as a lead underwriter and lead book runner. This is a groundbreaking deal because this is very first panda panda bond issued by African issuer and the first sustainable sovereign panda bond. It will be used to finance public projects in accordance with Egypt's sovereign sustainable financing framework, including climate-proof agriculture, clean transportation, sustainable water and waste management, affordable housing, affordable basic infrastructure. This milestone deal shows China and Egypt's deep cooperation in sustainable area under Belt and Road Initiative. So the panda bond means Egypt raising money in mainland China and fund the projects in Egypt. So this is something new and innovative. At Bank of China Hong Kong, I'm based in Hong Kong. We also leverage Hong Kong's advantage as a major financial hub under the Belt and Road Initiative. We have been particularly focusing on supporting sustainable infrastructure development in Asia and the Pacific. I'd like to share a few recent cases as well. Early this year, we helped issue a $188 million syndicated green term loan facility for Philippines' ACE renewable energy portfolio. We act as a green loan structuring bank. It is also the first green syndicated loan for Philippine corporator after release of the joint statement between China and the Philippines. It's also the largest green term loan facility for AC, aimed at financing development and the construction of ACE's diverse renewable project pipeline, including solar, wind, battery storage, pumped hydropower and energy storage in Philippines. And also we do something in Thailand. We provide a green loan to Energy Absolute, a Thai renewable energy company. This is the very first green RMB trading finance in Thailand. The financing will help reducing carbon emission from Thailand's public transportation system, and the loan has been successfully audited by an international independent certificate body based in Hong Kong. So this, I think, is another example addressing about the government's role, because in Hong Kong we've got so-called very successful third-party certificate system which can help us to audit all the green projects. Also, I'd like to share some kind of views. It's not lessons. Sorry about the, it's not answer your question straightforward, but I'd like to share some kind of viewpoints. First of all, I think Hong Kong is about Hong Kong. Hong Kong is the super connect between mainland China, Southeast Asia, and the rest of the world. As one of the world's leading international financial centers, Hong Kong can leverage its advanced financial infrastructure to fully play the role as a green super connector. As a bank in Hong Kong, Bank of China fully leverage Hong Kong advantage to connecting capital from around the world to fund projects in emerging markets, including mainland China. So this is to address the question or challenge my peers just talk about supply of the projects. There's a massive project supply in mainland China and I think Belt and Road countries. So by doing so, financial institutions can help meet financing and the technology needs of Asia's green transformation. Emerging markets could also share the sustainable investment opportunity within the world. The second point is about standard. For China and Southeast countries to achieve our Paris Agreement aligned decarbonization ambitions, scaling up transition finance is key. But unlike green activities, it's more complex to define transition activities and the standards among different countries. So this is why I think it's critical to have our platform like GIP and gathering financial institutions, governments, international organizations to explore the formation of green and sustainable standards, especially suitable for Southeast Asia and the Belt and Road countries. It can establish green investment and financial channels that connect China, Belt and Road countries, even the global community. The last point is still about partnership, or we need to work together. Due to large scale of infrastructure projects and uncertainty around surrounding low carbon technologies, many investors consider green infrastructure projects as of high risk. This is also, I want to touch upon about bankable as well. This is where partnership could play a key role in de-risk or sharing risk, if you like, these opportunities. Government could introduce incentives, supportive policy measures, capital injection into this kind of projects more bankable. So multilateral banks can design and create innovative financial structure to mobilize capital from public and private sectors, facilitate cross-border financing for developing countries. I'd like to just stop here, and thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dr. Kang. I think if the idea is to share good initiatives, I think I've already got one for Standard Chartered to look at. I think he mentioned about Egypt raising RMB bonds for local infrastructure. I know if my knowledge is right, Egypt's sovereign wealth fund has similar mandate to Indonesia. So maybe Stefanus, I need to get a mandate to raise RMB bonds for you, for helping you, but we'll talk about that offline. I think coming to two things that seem to be a general theme across all the comments, and those are around challenges. I see two things that Dr. Kang also mentioned, Joachim mentioned. One was about a uniform taxonomy, if you will. There is obviously a European taxonomy, there is an ASEAN taxonomy, but each of the countries are now trying to see if that taxonomy could be tweaked to their unique conditions. And if we need international funding, whether it is from Bank of China, AIIB, World Bank, then there needs to be certain standards that are accepted by everyone so that we get the funds that are required for development. The second challenge seems to be what we call just transition. The aspects that are applicable to developed countries may not be applicable to the developing countries, and within developing countries, there are emerging countries as well. How difficult is it to bridge this gap? And again, given that this is more policy domain, Hakimul, how can you or others help create an environment where capital can easily be accessible?
Yeah, thank you, Prashant. We have to understand first from the perspective from the developing country and also developed country. And we have to work closely with both of them. As you know that now Indonesia is on the their way to develop sustainable taxonomy. And then we have to daily involve in their discussion to ensure that there are no greenwashing there. So if we only looking for the outside, then maybe we cannot intervene that process. So by daily active discussion with them in the attending their FGD, give the perspective from the developed country, and also trying to balance what they call that, trying to balance about green and also their growth by by involving directly in the process, and also make sure that they know the consideration not only from the national perspective but also international perspective. I think finally they will we narrow the gap. I think this process, for example, like the Indonesia is clearly state that this document is the living document. Last year they have the green taxonomy. Now they will have the sustainable taxonomy, and every year they will update on that. I think this process, I think we can collaborate together to narrow the gap. Thank you.
Joachim, how can development finance institutions work with the governments? Because obviously you have more influence on the governments than a private sector lender or some of the private developers. Is there a role for DFIs to play in this policy coordination or synchronization across countries?
Definitely, and I would say the role of multilateral development banks in policy advice and facilitating partnerships is probably more important than our financing role. Now, we as AIIB are still very young, have very limited capacity, but I'm talking about the multilateral development banks as a group, which have traditionally played a very strong role in policy advice, so sharing experience across countries. advising countries on the regulatory framework. Let's say for the design of feed-in tariffs, power purchase agreements, so to take one of those early markets, where there's an incredible amount of learning happening between countries facilitated by multilateral development banks. But then sort of the building of trust between different partners is another key aspect of where the MDBs come into play. Infrastructure projects, as I said, are complex, affect many parties, many jurisdictions, project developers, financiers, government agencies, people on the ground who are affected by the physical works. And so the role of multilateral development banks really is to help create the trust between these parties that agreements are being honored. I think because of our privileged role, that the governments are our shareholders and we have therefore privileged access, including through our sort of financial terms with our shareholders, we can help build that kind of trust among the parties. For the investor to be able to trust that they will be paid, for the local communities to be able to trust that if there's resettlement, that will be done on fair terms to restore their livelihoods. For governments to be able to trust the investors that they will actually honor the commitments on emission standards and the like. So that's an absolutely key role, especially in these more complex structures that large infrastructure projects entail. And I think we should continue to play that role. Once a market is established, these things become standardized and can be scaled up on a commercial basis. So I mentioned, let's say, the India solar market, which is probably one of the most dynamic areas of green investment. There we have now reached the stage where we are often outcompeted on projects. And our financing is just not attractive enough. That's a great thing, because it means that the private sector can take over and can develop solutions at scale, which means we can, as development bank, can move on to the frontier of new challenges, countries where the regulatory framework is still untested or weak, or new technology spaces where the trust isn't there yet that the returns will justify the investments.
Thanks, Joachim. Stefanus, coming to you. Clearly, you have multiple financial investors. You have a lot of money lying on the side waiting for the projects. Are there different standards for different investors that you work with, which also pose a challenge for you? And more importantly, I also wanted you to focus on one of the sectors that I know INA is very focused on, which is the EV chain. How do you see this as a part of green infrastructure? How, obviously, Indonesia has a unique role in terms of being the largest producer of nickel, largest reserves of nickel, cobalt. How do you see INA helping get the investors, build Indonesia as a champion for EV in the region?
Okay, thank you, Prashant. Firstly, to your question, I will probably not saying that different partners have different standard on investment. Obviously, they have, all of our partners are world-class institution, including the local one, which have a certain global standard. But I will say probably a different appetite. Some investor probably willing to take slightly higher risk on something that is more related to green investment, so they will be more focused, especially if can collaborate with the likes of AIIB, the multilateral banks, and so on. So that's probably the slight difference. And to Joachim's point, at the end of the day, all these projects, it's always a massive and complex with many parties that need to collaborate. Our role in here is as the equity investor. So you have the banks, the multilateral financier, you have the equity, and together it becomes sort of like the blended finance that make it, hopefully on paper, the work, the project is feasible and everyone wins. But obviously it's not only about that. It's so complex, involving many things. But our role and our partner's role mainly on the equity side. To your second question, yes, for us, if I step back, we have one important pillar that that I mentioned in the beginning, which is the green energy and energy transition. Right? At least within these pillars, we have the renewable subsectors. We've done one with Masdar investing in Pertamina geothermal. We explore also nature-based solution, but I think the majority of the projects are in the EV and mobility, because clearly we have some advantage. It's a fast-growing market, and this is one of the important solution to the overall green transformation, green energy goals. So for us, in short, I think our role is not only keep pushing the smart capital coming in to Indonesia to develop this EV sector and make Indonesia one of the global hub for EV. But what we also want to do is try to move towards the downstream. So I think this is really a big sector, right? As you know, starting from the mining, smelting, all the way to making a battery precursor. Hopefully we do a battery manufacturing in here. We really hope, and I think few of the global EV players already set up the factory in here, like Hyundai, so we can supply the battery to the factory here and even export the battery globally, and all the way towards the EV charging. So I think, and obviously it's not only us, it's a collaboration with many parties, global investor, local investor, obviously government, including I see Pa Edwin from SMA here. We also partner with SMI. So, but the goal is to move from upstream towards the downstreaming. So that's in short what we are working on now.
Thanks, Stefanus. Dr. Kang, I think a couple of points that you mentioned I wanted to kind of elaborate on. One was around risk management for projects, especially when they are in the new field. Now, how can commercial banks like yourself and ourselves work with development finance institutions in two aspects? One is around, do you see both of us competing for the same projects because there are not so many projects in the pipeline? And is there a magic solution to that? And second, more importantly, in terms of risk mitigation, is there in a single project, are there options to structure it as different tranches where multilateral agencies, because of their mandate, can take a different risk than commercial banks? Would that make financing more attractive or more easily available for projects?
Okay, thank you for the question. I may start from the second question. And literally, my understanding for the risk so I think we are talking about bankable of this kind of projects. Literally, for commercial banks, we are a commercial institution to manage risks. So we like risks. But the thing is, so we need to understand the risk, measure the risk, and price the risk correctly. So in terms of all the this kind of the projects you just talked about, they are sort of innovative, new, and some kind of revolutionary. So for us, this is not only if, for example, we try to pitch in for one project, we try to win this kind of projects. It's not only the business front line, it's about risk management. It's about all the policy procedures, and it's all about from top down. So this is something we are talking about the innovation within the bank. So this is also, it's not something we just add new products or new service into our current framework service or product service line. This is something we need to be innovative in risk management, operating, clearing, even non-performing loan management, sort of everything across the bank. So I think commercial banks are working very hard to, including Bank of China, to build this kind of new ecosystem. We have done a lot of work, and I think as soon as it's done, we will be well prepared to fund or finance this kind of projects. So I try to answer your question from this kind of angle. And in terms of, sorry, I can't remember your first question.
First question is, do you see that we and development finance institutions seem to be competing for the same projects because of lack of projects, because all of us need to show successes? So do you see somewhere that there is an overlap on what we are doing instead of being supplemental to each other's efforts?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to touch upon the supply of the projects as well, because for us, we see a lot of projects that to be funded or to be financed. But for us, as my answer to the second question, we need to be well prepared in terms of risk management for these projects, because we are in China, so we've got, like, I think one of the most largest green and sustainable economic activity in the world. So I think for us, we look at this kind of question from the angle how we make ourselves better ready for financing this kind of projects. And for us, we also will be focusing on some kind of technology innovation projects, like in sustainable infrastructure, like energy storage, carbon capture, sustainable material, these kind of things. So to be honest, we don't feel that it's short of supply in terms of projects. But for us, we just need to be more innovative to fund more this kind of projects. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Kang. Joachim, would you have a view on whether we should be looking at different risks or different pots of capital, or we should be competing for the best outcome for our clients?
So the first step is to not just allocate risk well, but to reduce the risk of projects. I've seen in the infrastructure space many projects that cannot be financed because the risks that are perceived to be so high, that the financing cost is so high that the project isn't bankable. So the first question is, how do you bring down that risk? When you unpack the risks, very often governments are actually a source of the risks. I can think of examples in ASEAN where you have renewables markets where let's say the power purchase agreements have clauses that are creating undue risks for investors that mean these are essentially non-bankable PPAs. So the first step really is to ask, how can we reduce those risks? Once you've done that, many projects become financeable. Then you ask who is best placed to carry which risk. I mentioned earlier the securitization of infrastructure assets. To me, it's quite technical, but it's actually quite important to bring infrastructure finance to scale, because you have different parties that have different tolerance, acceptance of risks. So you have commercial banks, and I'm sure you know this better than anybody here, who are quite capable of taking the project risk, the development risk. That's your business, and so you're good at that. On the other hand, the bulk of the funds that are actually investable are managed by institutional investors. That's where the trillions are. Those funds and their managers are not particularly well equipped to take project development risk, for example. And so you need to put the different pieces of the market together. And the securitization does that. It allows you, as a commercial bank, to sell off your assets once they're developed, package them, create a pool of assets that are at scale and that are sufficiently diversified to sell them then to institutional investors. That's now beginning to happen. Still at a modest scale, but I think it's really hopeful that that market is sort of becoming fluid. Now, I know the US mortgage market has gotten a bad name in the financial crisis, but it is in a sense a similar concept, and if it's well and carefully regulated and carefully managed, that is, I think, a big piece of the solution for bringing the large-scale institutional capital with its particular risk tolerance and characteristics into this market.
Thanks, Joachim. So one of the other things, Hakimul, I wanted to talk about was around when you look at renewable energy, you can't look at it on a standalone, right? It depends on the grid capacity, it depends on the demand supply in a particular region, it depends on the policy around for if you want to shut down a coal-fired power plant, do you give renewable energy project in return, do you split it aside? So there are various aspects that one needs to look at from a policy perspective, and once, like Joachim said, once the policy is done, once a couple of projects are done, then the money will come much more easier into the country. So how do you see that developing in Indonesia? Because there is obviously RUPTL and others talk about huge development on the renewable side, but the actual projects haven't kept pace with the ambition.
Yeah, thank you, Prashant. So we need to balance. I mean, from the government perspective, the first thing is trying to set target. But now it seems that target is only target, right? Now, then, as the development partner, we help them in achieving their target. For example, if we know the gap, then, for example, if we know the trajectory and we know the gap, then we are trying to find the financial solution first. For example, in Indonesia, if we're talking about renewable energy, maybe it is more developed than energy efficiency. But actually, the energy efficiency is considered like first fuel. But financial institution and also government help themselves is not make it a priority. So as the development partner, we're trying to offer the solution to the government and prioritize from the low-hanging fruit, something like that. Thank you.
Thanks. Stefanus, I think one of the criticisms that we've seen of CIPP, which was just announced recently, is it doesn't take into account the captive power plants. Now, a lot of these captive power plants are on the EV chain, where the smelters are fired by coal-fired power plants. Now, when you talk to some of your investors, is that a concern today, or should everybody today, given that we need EV today, we need to invest now, but we need to have a transition plan over a period of time to attract more capital? Have you had any of those challenges when you speak to investors?
I think it was in some of the discussion, but at the end of the day, the investors are practical, right? We cannot have everything perfect day one, right? We have to push the development of EV as soon as possible, and the government has proved that the past 10 years the development is pretty amazing in here. So, but I think we cannot have everything perfect in day one. Over time, we'll make it better. I give you another example. Yeah, sorry to jump to different sector that happened to be part of my coverage, which is the digital infrastructure, data center. Of course, ideally, we have everything perfect day one, green energy, 100%, you know, the top quality of cooling system, water management, and so on, right? But Indonesia is in big needs of increasing the supply of data center, because just to give you example, not to compare to Singapore or other big markets, just comparing to one city in Malaysia, which is Johor. The capacity of data center in Johor is probably almost as big or equal to the whole Indonesia supply of data center. Can you imagine? Just one city in Malaysia, right? So we cannot wait everything perfect day one. we start first, we work with PLN, we try to explore collaboration to get a blue energy through gas, and over time we are pushing to have sort of like a solar panel, solar energy around the area and so on. So I think the similar thinking also in an EV, that we are progressing. We start first. There is important things that need to be done, but we kept that in mind, and that's our role here. That's why we are in the picture, right? So that we can monitor on the regular basis towards what, towards moving into the really a green energy environment.
Thanks, Stefanus. Joachim, last question for you, and then we'll close with Dr. Kang. One of the challenges for some of these infrastructure development is infrastructure has local currency cash flows. A lot of financing comes in foreign currency, and obviously there is a mismatch. And given where dollar was over the last few months, and thankfully it's kind of traced back, can development finance institutions play a role in developing the local bond markets where we are able to manage this foreign currency risk much better?
I mean, you're right to point out this critical challenge. And it is a challenge also for us as international development finance institutions, because our balance sheet is in foreign currencies, so our primary activities are in foreign currency. Now, over time, MDBs have developed tools for providing local currency finance, either through swaps or through local issuances. But in a sense, that's a band-aid. You're pointing toward where the solution lies, which is really the local capital market development. And MDBs, multilateral development banks, can do a number of things to help countries with the local capital market development. One is, of course, sharing advice, giving suggestions across countries on how to set up the market, how to increase the depth of the market. But secondly, they can help the local market development by becoming issuers themselves. And our peers, IFC, EBRD, and others have become very active issuers in certain local bond markets. And that's a critical, I think, contribution we can make to the development of those markets. In some countries, that's become a very active tool. In others, frankly, it's also the local authorities that are not encouraging that. So, for example, in Indonesia, MDBs have not done that. I think the government's preference has so far been not to bring foreign or multilaterals into that market, whereas other countries have used multilaterals to develop the local capital markets. But I just strongly subscribe to your notion that the solution is increasing the depth of the local capital market, because that's where ultimately long-term financing in local currency can come from at a more affordable cost than international finance. But that will be, in many markets, a long, long road. So we shouldn't pretend or expect that that's going to be a short fix in a few years. We have to work on this, but at the same time, we have to also make sure that we develop the mechanisms by which international long-term, low-cost capital can flow into local infrastructure projects, and managing those currency risks effectively.
Joachim, Dr. Kang, we've almost run out of time. Last 30 seconds for you. If you could kind of help us understand, given where the RMB rates are versus dollar, are there chances for ASEAN developers to access RMB financing? And are there hedging tools available to manage the currency risk?
Thank you for your question. This is also I will try to add upon my peers' question. Because as you said, there's some kind of a change in terms of global currencies, in terms of interest rate and other things. But I think it's good to have a second option at RMB, for example, to finance these kind of projects. And this is something we are doing at the moment. For example, I just mentioned the Panda bonds, which is a good successful story for use RMB to fund this kind of projects in Southeast Asia. And also we've got some things in bond, and we've got some kind of RMB bond for local projects, and we provide sort of a solution in terms of FX trading and swap, everything. So this is, I think it's good to have a second option, because given the RMB interest rate is lower than US dollar at the moment, and it's more efficient, cost efficient, and also China is open to fund this kind of projects, sustainable infrastructure projects. So I think it's a good idea to have a another option in the global markets for funding this kind of sustainable infrastructure projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kang. Thank you very much for your time. I would like to thank the panel, and I hope it was useful for some of our audience. Thanks again for the insightful discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prashant, and the panel for a very insightful discussion. We have a couple minutes waiting for His Excellency Kim Hourn to arrive, but please be seated, as it's a very important keynote speech, and we'll commence shortly once he arrives. Thank you. Welcome to His Excellency Kao Kim Hourn, Secretary General of the ASEAN Secretariat. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very honored to be joined by His Excellency Kao Kim Hourn, Secretary General of the Association of Southeast Asia Nations, ASEAN. We are very grateful to His Excellency for making the time out of his very busy schedule to come and address this forum. The first half of yesterday, we had a very packed series of keynote speeches, welcoming remarks, and of course, the grand launching ceremony of the Green Investment Principles Southeast Asia chapter, which set the tone for the forum. The rest of yesterday and today have been filled with very insightful discussions. Present here are invited participants, or as Bumari would say, diehard experts, who have been so eager to talk through the topics that are presented in this forum. So without further ado, I would like to invite His Excellency to deliver his keynote on ASEAN challenges on sustainable finance and solution. His Excellency, the floor is yours.
Dr. Mary Pengestu, Chair of the Green Investment Principles, Southeast Asia Chapter. Mr. Rino Donosaputro, Co-Chair of the GIP Southeast Asia Chapter, Vice Chairman ASEAN, and President Commissioner Indonesia of the Standard Chartered Bank. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. My apologies that I should have been here yesterday, but I was in Laos on my way back. I had to lead the ASEAN Secretariat delegation for a working visit to help prepare Laos for the chairmanship 2024. And but today it's good to be here at CSIS. I know we have been working together for a very, very long time. It went back to 25, 30 years ago. So you can imagine the relationship. In fact, I just returned from a working visit in Laos very late last night. Actually, my speaking slot was originally planned for November 30th, but since I had the lead the delegation, I asked the organizer if I could speak today. So you were generously offered this opportunity. So thank you very much. I want to extend my sincere appreciation for the kind invitation to deliver these remarks. And I understand that you had the launch of the Green Investments Principle Southeast Asia chapter yesterday already, and a series of roundtable discussions on sustainable finance. The launch, as well as the roundtable dialogues, truly underscore the urgency and importance of tapping the finance sector to advance sustainability in green transition in the ASEAN region as we move on from the COVID-19 pandemic. What I want to say is that in my 11 months on this job, wherever I have gone, the keywords green finance has come up regularly, just about in every conversation, and how it has shown how important it is to ASEAN, and of course to all ASEAN member states. Indeed, ASEAN's economic performance, as you know, is a true testament to the region's success in navigating the global economic headwinds in the post-pandemic era. Last year, we had a rebound of economic growth of 5.7%, and of course, ASEAN is poised to remain quite strong, particularly with the bright spot. For this year, with the projected 4.6%, and 4.8% of economic growth for next year. I think despite the fact the gloomy global economic uncertainties. The region's trade and investment have already surpassed the pre-pandemic levels, with $3.8 trillion in total trade in goods and $224.2 billion in foreign direct investment inflow. In fact, that's already put ASEAN in the second place. I think despite the fact that there's a lot of competition there to attract FDIs. As a whole, as one of the key economic powerhouses in the world and the fifth largest economic bloc, ASEAN places great importance on the region's sustainable growth and is determined to foster its sustainability agenda. All ASEAN member states are signatories to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, and have agreed to the regional roadmap for implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in Asia and the Pacific. At the regional level, ASEAN has recently adopted the ASEAN Strategy for Carbon Neutrality and the Framework for Circular Economy for the ASEAN Economic Community that outline the structure pathway for the ASEAN member state to take collective actions and enhance collaboration towards a low-carbon future. ASEAN recognizes that a strong and thriving financial sector ensures macro stability, provides an enabling environment for businesses, and leads to green transition solutions. With this, I'm pleased to share some of my view, but of course, particularly ASEAN's key initiatives to enable green transition. I just want to underline again, with all the dialogue partners, the discussions have been quite extensive on green transition. But also in the private sector, we have heard so much already across the region, but also even where we will go talk about the green transition. First, as the enabler for green transition, the ASEAN financial sector is moving forward towards coherent regulatory frameworks that will channel the necessary resources towards sustainable transition throughout the region. For this purpose, ASEAN adopted the ASEAN Taxonomy for Sustainable Finance last year, an inclusive and credible classification system that will help financial institutions, I think both public and private, and investors to match their investments with sustainable projects in all ASEAN countries. In addition, the ASEAN Transition Finance Guidance was also adopted early this year to provide a policy framework for ASEAN member states to assist companies in creating better and ambitious transition pathways. Second, ASEAN is enhancing partnership with dialogue partners to explore financing facilities to support the ASEAN member state in meeting their financial demands and their sustainability journeys. ASEAN requires approximately $200 billion annually until 2030 in order to succeed with the green transformation. And that's a lot of resources that will be required. And of course, also a good opportunity for investment. For the last several years, ASEAN has extended tremendous efforts to diversify funding sources. The ASEAN Infrastructure Fund, AIF, has been repositioned as an ASEAN Green Fund by mainstreaming the ASEAN catalytic green finance facilities in order to enhance its credibility to international investors and therefore attract more green funds from financing partners. In bilateral channels, the European Union has agreed to mobilize 10 billion euros to support green transition and sustainable connectivity in Southeast Asia through the EU's Global Gateway. Many of the ASEAN member states are exploring synergies between the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, projects, and ASEAN Sustainability Agenda to promote green financial resources in the development of transportation networks, smart cities, and renewable energy projects. Here, I just want to share with you that we have seen a lot of projects, infrastructure projects now. We in ASEAN, we know very well already that the speed train from Jakarta to Bandung, and Laos, the speed train also in operation already. The two bigger speed train projects that will be implemented in Thailand, also in Myanmar, for example, take place. And of course, smart cities projects now, there's a lot of discussion only among ASEAN member states, but also with our dialogue partners, including Japan as well. And on renewable energy projects, this is really the talks of the day. There's a lot of projects out there. Not only you talk about solar projects, wind projects, hydro projects, even waste to energy solution project as well. Third, ASEAN is making strides in attracting green financing and promoting interoperable market-based solutions that will ultimately build a regional green ecosystem. As guided by the ASEAN strategy for carbon neutrality, ASEAN leverages on various initiatives and harnesses the complementarities across the region to build pathways to channel the necessary capital across the region. Developing credible and interoperable carbon markets and green bond market is the regional top priority in the financial sector. For that purpose, ASEAN has adopted the sustainable bond standards and the green bond standards, which help tap the bond market for sustainable financing. As of September of this year, the amount of green, social, and sustainability bonds issuance reached more than $41 billion, while the carbon markets are still being developed at the moment. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, notwithstanding the progress, much work needs to be done in order to build capacity and promote knowledge sharing, to advance sustainability initiatives. As the launch of GIP, it's now called ASEAN, I understand, yet not Southeast Asia, is an important milestone in convening the academia, the banking sector, and the financial regulations. I encourage our GIP colleagues to look into initiatives on the implementation of education, promotion, and rolling out of capacity building programs in order to create the right de-risking structure that will make sustainability and transition a worthwhile and attractive initiative for the financial sector. I think, again, the focus here on capacity building, training, and program, I think this is going to be really the key. With ASEAN's work track on sustainability, sharing knowledge and best practice with GIP in driving investment into sustainable projects and promoting the development of green finance products will prove to be beneficial. I think really there's a lot of demands. I hope that the GIP will be working very hard with ASEAN. In closing, with ASEAN's drive towards sustainable development, I look forward to a productive and meaningful engagement with GIP ASEAN in harnessing these opportunities and guiding our region towards a future that thrives with inclusivity and sustainable growth. Finally, I wish to express my sincere appreciation to the organizers, I see there's a lot of here, and sponsors, for organizing this important forum. And let me end by expressing my congratulations on the launching of GIP ASEAN. I wish there remains success, a session a success. Thank you very much, and a good morning to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, His Excellency. We would now like to invite His Excellency back on stage to take a picture with Ibu Mari and Padoni. Our plaque should be upstairs, Bu. Please. Thank you very much once again to His Excellency for his keynote speech.
It's good to see everyone. We're just waiting for my slides to come up. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm going to be talking about nature-based solutions, what my company does in our history, and the success we've had working in Sumatra, but also touching on carbon markets in general, and then giving an overview of how carbon markets are materializing in Indonesia, and then also ASEAN. We founded our company back in 2010 when environmental markets were just emerging. And we now have a portfolio of over 250,000 hectares where we're restoring ecosystems covering wetlands, forests, and even marine protected areas. And we have a proven track record. We've produced over 2.6 million carbon credits to date, and from that we've been able to secure contracts totaling over $46 million. There's a major problem affecting the world and Indonesia specifically. In the last 8 years alone, over 4 million hectares of forests have burned. And when we look globally, that figure is over 12 million hectares. So the need to protect our forests is clear. And we're based here in Indonesia because the forestry state alone is over 120 million hectares. And 36% of the world's peatlands are here, along with 20% of the world's mangroves. And we have a major opportunity to work to restore these forests by accessing environmental markets. But in order to do that, we need to be able to tap into institutional capital, and there needs to be a number of proven project developers in the country. Our company has been designed to deploy capital at scale, and we've been able to attract investment from some of the biggest institutional investors in Europe, such as Morova, which is based in France, and AXA Investment Managers, the financial wing of AXA, the insurance company, out of the UK. And also recently, we've taken on investment from Indonesian investors like Saratoga, who have recently come onto our cap table. And by having trusted institutional investors on our side, we've been able to develop high-quality carbon credits, and we've marketed those to well-known Fortune 500 brands such as Chanel, Nestle, BMW. Yep, let's go back one. Sorry about that. Very good, we're back on track. In 2016, we started our first project, the Sumatra Peatland Project, with a $6 million loan. And we were able to repay that within 4 years' time, showing that we had a proven financial model that could deliver returns to our investors and also create impact on the ground. Our company became profitable. I'm just going to take this off so I can look at the screen. Our company became profitable in 2022, and we distributed dividends to our shareholders. And now I want to talk to you about our flagship Sumatra Peatland project. This is a 23,000 hectare area in Sumsel in the Kabupaten of Musim Banyuasin. The picture that you see on the screen was in 2016 when we visited the site with one of our investors. He said the site reminded him of Mordor, the mythical wasteland in the movie Lord of the Rings. The area had been dredged, logged, and burned. It was an environmental wasteland. And this gives you a sense of the scale that we're dealing with. The area was 3.5 times the size of the island of Manhattan in New York City. And this is what it looked like. A very depressing site with no trees, and you can see the scars of the recent fires that took place. So how did we do it? We have a proven model. We find suitable sites that need restoration. We secure finance. We restore the area. And then we verify the results and we communicate that to investors and carbon credit buyers. First, we find sites with high potential for ecosystem restoration, carbon removal, biodiversity values, and also community benefits. On the financing side, we secure investors. We purchase the land rights for the large-scale forest areas in Indonesia. We then finance our activities on the ground by selling credits, and we repay investors for the investments that they've made. And we're seeking to replicate this model over and over in Indonesia. On the restoration side, we work to enable Mother Nature to do the work. And we do that by removing the drivers of deforestation. In the case of the Sumatra Meringue peatland project, that was fire. And so we did that by restoring the hydrology and bringing the water back into the ecosystem by building hundreds of natural earthen dams in order to raise the water levels. As a result, this prevented fire for many, many years. And then we started to see the natural generation take place. We also create ecological corridors to allow biodiversity to connect with other forest blocks. The biodiversity also facilitates the restoration of these areas by dispersing seeds. And we also, key to our success is by working with local people in providing employment opportunities on the ground. The verification part is key. The buyers of carbon credits And we can see that most of the trades happened between state-owned enterprises, state-owned banks buying from state-owned energy companies. So there really hasn't been a lot of trading taking place, but it is a good first step that we've seen. And so I've put this graphic up here. Basically, it's showing that since the opening day, there's been no more transactions taking place. So the infrastructure is there. So when is trading going to start? And I think that that's going to be very dependent on the policies that are put forth and an emerging carbon tax that we'll see in Indonesia in the coming years. There's been a lot of carbon regulation coming out since 2021 at the end of the year with a presidential regulation. This regulation really identified carbon markets as an important part of the Indonesian economy. And since then, we've seen a number of implementing regulations come out. And I think we may be hearing more about that at the upcoming COP. But right now, the markets still need more infrastructure, more clarifications in order for it to really flourish. So I wanted to compare the carbon markets in ASEAN to other regions in the world. And you can see from this graphic that ASEAN is kind of trending closer towards Africa, with Latin America really taking the lead. You can see in ASEAN there's 15 projects for nature-based solutions covering a total of 1 million hectares. And I think that this is a really important figure that we can see, is that people prior to this were criticizing project-level carbon market projects in the forestry sector as not reaching scale. But here you can see there's now over 1 million hectares, and that number is set to increase rapidly over the coming years. Latin America has already taken it to a much larger scale. Over 10 million hectares are being protected by projects, 99 projects in total, and the same with Africa. Over 7 million hectares are now being protected. So with Indonesia's forestry estate, this number can greatly expand. The numbers in ASEAN are increasing, and this is a really positive sign. We're going to be seeing more projects coming out of Malaysia. The Philippines now has a number of projects in the pipeline. And again, going back to the standards, what do the markets trust? What types of standards are organizations using? And as you can see, Vera is the dominant standard across the board. And so should countries be looking to create their own standards, or should they be allowing international third-party trusted standards to be used? And so carbon markets are expanding across all of the countries in ASEAN. Thailand has also just launched its first voluntary carbon exchange in September, similar to Indonesia. Philippines as well. We're seeing a number of projects coming online there. I think one interesting point on this slide is that Indonesia's Kadin has been in bilateral talks with the Philippines around project development. And to sort of end the presentation, really what's going to be driving carbon markets in the future? And I think that that is around carbon taxation. And you can see China has implemented a carbon tax with around $8 per ton. Also South Korea and Japan. And these could become very important markets for carbon credits produced in ASEAN that can then be sold into these compliance markets that are emerging. And then also within Southeast Asia, we've seen the proliferation of carbon exchanges within the different countries in the bloc. And I think Singapore is really one of the interesting points because they have a carbon tax in place. It's going to be increased close to 80 Singaporean dollars in 2030. And they're also looking at integrating carbon credits from countries across ASEAN into their compliance market. So with that, I'd like to end the presentation and open it up to any questions people may have. Anybody? Don't be shy. Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much for your interesting presentation. I just want to ask you one question. You said that this carbon market success will depend on the trust and also the regulation that the government set up. So my question is, what kind of trust or how we build the trust? That one thing. And the second, what kind of government regulation that have to be set up so that this carbon market can work? Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, very good question. On the trust side, it's key to be able to demonstrate impact. A lot of the criticisms that we've seen recently on carbon markets is companies, people saying that, you know, the CO2 emission reductions haven't taken place, communities aren't being supported in ways that they should be. And so robust data collection, we're seeing with technology, we can monitor forests more frequently at higher levels of resolution. And so I think all of that is going to be, you know, brought in to new standards that are emerging. Also, the market is coalescing around the principles of what a high quality project looks like. And so I think the 10 principles that I showed earlier in the presentation from the Integrity Council on Voluntary Carbon Markets is going to be important. Countries can't be developing standards and methodologies in a vacuum. They need to be leveraging these principles, making sure that they're integrated. And also, countries should not be developing standards and not talking to the buyers. We don't want there to be a product that's created that nobody wants to buy. And I think that's you know, something that we need to be cognizant about as these markets start emerging. And so I think standardization across regions will also help the market provide trust, where people can know that a credit that they buy in Indonesia compared to a credit in Philippines will be the same. And so that's one way to build further trust. And in your last question?
What kind of regulation? You said that the success depends on the government regulation. So what kind of regulation that so that this carbon market gets success?
Yeah, so I think one policy that could be implemented that would really provide a lot of fuel to the industry is a carbon tax. And so by setting a carbon tax, you're setting the floor price for carbon. And they can allow companies, in lieu of paying that tax, to buy credits from projects. And so we've seen that work very well in Colombia. They set a floor price on carbon. And so what you see is the price of a carbon credit tracks almost just to the point of the tax. So there's a little bit of a savings for the company that buys the credits. And so in the case study of Singapore with their carbon tax, they're proposing to follow a similar system. And so Indonesia could do the same for its domestic market. It has a proposed carbon tax coming online in the coming years. And so it could either have companies pay the tax or buy credits from projects that are approved by the government. So I think that would really drive the sector, because it also provides assurances on what the prices are and how projects can predict their future revenues. And so then it becomes more of a safe investment to more traditional debt financiers on the commercial side. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, very insightful. So in terms of ensuring sustainability of the carbon project, right? I'm just wondering, particularly with the social inclusion part of it, so what's your take in terms of, let's say, agroforestry as a way to also bringing, you know, additional revenue streams, or even having it as the main revenue stream and having the the carbon credits as the supplementary stream, because I do think that the social inclusion part of a lot of these projects would play a vital role in this. Thanks.
Yeah, that's right. Agroforestry is definitely a strategy that my own company is starting to employ as we start to look at sites that have high levels of degradation. Usually if a forest has been highly degraded, it means that the communities are there. They're looking to generate revenues from the lands where they're working. And so one way that we see as a really successful strategy is to engage with communities, not only because it's going to work at an implementation level, but we're seeing that buyers want projects that are creating real green economy in rural communities. And so agroforestry is a way that we can bring the forest back, but also create revenue streams for community members themselves. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yep.
Thank you, Novia from CSIS. I just want to ask, how do you ensure there is an additionality from your carbon projects? Because one of the things from a lot of carbon projects is they're finding it difficult to prove that there is an additionality from the carbon projects. And one of the things that to ensure it's a credible carbon projects is to showcase is an additional contributions toward climate change. Thank you.
Yeah. Forest carbon works primarily in Indonesia, and I would say proving additionality here is much easier because most of the forestry estate has been designed as production forests. So it's zoned as production forests where companies can obtain the right to clear cut, create industrial plantations, convert the land into agro businesses. And so there's a real threat level here in this country. And so as a company, we're going out and acquiring HTI licenses where the threat is clear, and we're taking those licenses from groups that have a real intention of clearing that forest and stopping that. And so that's how, as a company, we prove the additionality on our projects. Yep.
Thank you. It's very interesting presentation. Thank you. Just one question that you said trading in ITX carbon is very flat, and after the first day trading, almost nothing. So my question is how to create the demand. You mentioned about carbon tax. Is that enough, or do you need other things that will create more demand? Thank you.
I think for the Indonesian Carbon Exchange, one, it would be great if they opened up the exchange for nature-based solution projects. So Indonesia had already produced over 75 million carbon credits from this sector, and those were absent from the launch of the exchange. And those projects have massive demand from outside buyers globally. And so I think that would be a first step, is to broaden the types of projects that are being offered on the exchange. I think allowing projects that are using various standards for their certification would also provide It's good now.
the population of Sumatra, I would like to know how do you determine the impact you make towards the community? Because you did mention that you did pay dividend to your investors. So if you're able to do that, how do you determine the impact you make to the community with regards to the population? Because just 8,000 members from the community, I don't think that is enough. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I think touching on the scale, in our area, it's very remote. So that's the entire population that lives in proximity to our forest restoration site. So we're working with everybody that lives in that region. So while it may seem like a small number, you know, I think it's quite impactful. And these areas in the remote places in the country often receive very few governmental services. And so as a company, we've come in and have helped build and expand the health infrastructure. On education, we've built libraries, we've created adult education programs, we have after-school programs for children, and so we provide scholarships for teachers. So really building out different you know, interventions that really sort of kickstart the economies of these rural communities. And so as a company, we keep very detailed data on everyone that participates in these programs, what the results are, and how the community also you know, sees the impact and how happy they are with the results of the project's interventions. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. I've enjoyed the discussions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We'll be moving to session 4, but we're just setting up the stage for now. Now, in our very last session for this forum on financing energy transition, a derivative of green infrastructure, financing the green energy transition in Southeast Asia is a mission of its own. Southeast Asia, with its abundant renewable resources, including solar, wind, and hydroelectric power, has the potential to become a powerhouse in green energy production. However, innovative financing mechanisms such as public-private partnerships, green bonds, and venture capital investments are instrumental in attracting the necessary funds. Existing initiatives such as coal phase out and GETP in a number of Southeast Asian countries are embodiments of the region's steps toward the shift in renewable energy. The discussion on generating willpower to finance green energy transition outside of external grants is fundamental for Southeast Asia to reach its net zero goals by 2060. This discussion will be moderated by Ibu Mari Pangestu, Chair of GIP's ASEAN chapter. Ibu Mari, please be on stage. And I would also like to invite David and Edwin to come on stage. Thank you.
Okay, we have, sorry to rush you just then, but we have a time constraint because of Friday prayers. And one of our speakers, Pa Edo, he's at the COP right now in Dubai, I guess promoting JETP. He has a hard stop at 11:30, so I'm gonna get the show rolling, if you don't mind, with Edo, because he does have a hard stop. So this session is the last session, but hopefully it's going to be a great session, even though we are going to be tight for time. And as you know, it is about financing energy transition, or some of us would add, financing just and affordable energy transition. Our finance minister was always adding these two adjectives to it. Let me just, I won't do any introduction just because I know Pa Edo has a time constraint. So I will go straight to Pa Edo Mahendra, who's the head of our JETP Secretariat. He's the special advisor to the coordinating minister for maritime affairs and investment on carbon pricing and energy transition. So for Pa Edo, we know that we're going to ask you about, of course, the Just Energy Transition Partnership, which was launched in November 2022 at the G20 summit with a number of 20 billion attached to it. And it is meant to be a blended finance platform with grants, concessional and commercial loans, guarantees, and bringing in the private investment. So first of all, congratulations for a few days ago, I guess exactly on November 22nd, right? 22nd in 23, so a year later, they have completed the comprehensive investment and policy plan for the just energy transition. And it was, I know, a mammoth effort to get all the government agencies, PLN, and development partners, and the 10 partners of G7+3 all together on this platform. So if maybe you can share with us what the lessons learned and what you can share with us about what comes next and what your main lessons learned from your experience in coming up with this investment plan under the Just Energy Transition.
Yeah, thank you, Ibu Mari Pangestu. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Apologies, of course, in advance that I may have a kind of a hard stop at around 11:30 or 11:35. So I'm going to be try to be very succinct and brief. Thank you, Ibu Mari, for the question. So basically, yeah, it has been a momentous, a mammoth effort. I just hope that it will not be extinct like the mammoth. So basically now, so the experience that we learn from here is, I mean, it takes a lot of efforts, multi-stakeholders approach, inclusive, participatory, and then that is based on analytical approach in order to create this plan. Now, this has been, of course, kind of challenging for Indonesia because in terms of the preparation, as you maybe most of you already know, that the process in preparing the CIPP consisting of multiple stakeholders, be it the internal national stakeholders and also international stakeholders. We created an ecosystem whereby the international stakeholders, including international organizations, contributed to the work of to the completion of the CIPP through our working group ecosystem. So we have 4 working groups, and these working groups are basically not the secretariat, but their output were basically the input of the CIPP. And we tried to to look into different lenses, as we try to be as comprehensive as possible, looking at the power subsector. And the lessons is like it's tough, but it's good. I think we can be happy with this conditional plan. Why? Because we have the trajectory, the pathway, the necessary policy, some framework for the just transition, which of course need to be further expanded to the implementation level, and also the financing scheme. So everything is very transparent. In that over 300 pages of document, you can see the list of projects as well. We have the priority projects like a menu, and then we also have the top priority projects. So what I say here, it's been a really interesting, a fun adventure. We did it, we launched it, and now it's time for action. And we invite everyone to basically join this journey of Indonesia's energy transition. Hopefully, everyone can contribute to this journey.
Thank you very much, Pa Edo. I think those of you who are not that familiar with JETP, there is already the document, this comprehensive, I can't remember the whole, comprehensive investment and policy plan for the just energy transition. So what he has said is very apt to the session, to open up the session, in the sense that we've been talking since yesterday about the need for more money. Because of the financing gap and because of the urgency to act at scale to address the climate crisis. I think that was kind of the conversation from yesterday. And how do we actually go forward on achieving that? And actually ASEAN, Asia is one of the regions where if you actually could phase out or phase down the use of coal in Asia, you would actually make a big impact on the global climate action to reduce CO2 emission. These are numbers that come from a World Bank study. 42% of the emission comes from non-OECD Asia, driven by coal. 6 major emitters in Asia, China, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, and Pakistan. So 3 are ASEAN countries. And we need about 13 trillion. This was the estimated amount. And this is where I think a comprehensive approach is, I think, what we have been advocating for. That's why I added the 2 adjectives, just and affordable. That it's not just about the coal exit. And I think, Dr. Ma, you also mentioned it yesterday. It's not just about going into renewables or phasing out or phasing, I have to be careful here, phasing out and phasing down coal use. There's also the cleanup and the repurposing of the assets. There's the increased efficiency. Even with coal exit, you're still going to have coal fired power plants for at least another 10, 20, maybe 30 years. So efficiency, CCS, so technology, besides financing, the role of technology. And then, of course, the social cost, of the displacement of the workers or of the regions that are dependent. And modernizing the grid. I think sometimes that many discussions forget to put in the fact that you do need to invest in modernizing the grids. So these are different investment needs that will have to come from different financing needs. So what is the role of concessional MDB and grants and so on to mobilize private capital to come in, right? This is the big question of that the JETP was also struggling with, or hopefully not struggling anymore, but at least trying to make it happen. The numbers are not very encouraging right now. For every $1 of MDB concessional financing, it's crowding in less than $1 of private capital. So what needs to be done? You need to have a comprehensive approach, which is what the proof of example we have to yet see in the action. The platform that Indonesia and others like Vietnam and South Africa are trying to create is a comprehensive approach, because, as Edo said, lots of government agencies are involved. Normally there's a state-owned utility company in the middle of it. This is not just for Indonesia, for other countries. So it does need a whole of government and then a whole of economy approach, as the different components, and whole of society, because it has to be just and affordable. So if you wanted to have that kind of platform, you need to have the government have the political commitment to lead on such a platform with the policies, with the regulations and the principles, and of course also the government needs to come with funding as well, budget, and the policies and the framework. Then you can create this platform. So this is what's trying to happen. And just to put the context of our discussion today, there's a bit of, I think there's been progress, because yesterday we talked a lot about how, I think Dr. Ma, you were rightly saying, for developing countries, what we need is money. You can talk about the risks and the climate risk and the risks of investing in sustainable infrastructure, but we need money. And we need to be able to mobilize it in a way that understands, and whether regulatory-wise or how you measure it, what is transition finance, what is transition projects, right? And the good news is that there's some progress on that front with the ASEAN Sustainable Taxonomy, recognizing that early coal exit is put in the amber box. And then Dr. Ma himself chaired the G20 Sustainable Working Group on Sustainable Finance, which came up with I better get this right because he's in front of me, the framework for transition finance. And it has come up with principles and suggestions. So we're there, but every regulator needs to adjust their regulations to enable banks to be able to do the loan. So I just wanted to add that as kind of a context. And yesterday, I think, Pak Doni, you told me something, somebody asked you a question. Why did all these international banks leave the science-based principles? And your answer was that it's because it doesn't include transition finance. So, this is kind of where we are at now. So let's continue our discussion. If I may, I think Chai, I'm going to mispronounce your name. Chayarat?
Chayarat.
Okay.
And can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You also need to leave early, so let me go to you from Bangkok Bank to give us the banker's perspective. From your experience as Bangkok Bank, have you been able to provide loans to energy transition projects? If so, why, and what has been the driver for it? And if not, what are some of the regulatory changes, or what are the constraints that you face? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
It's a delay.
First,
I think there's a problem with the connection.
The energy transition. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you speak louder?
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Okay. My apology for the signal technical problem. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you now. Yeah, and they can turn the volume up here.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Let me start by introducing Bangkok Bank and the role that the bank has played in supporting energy transition efforts across ASEAN. And then later I will discuss about the challenges that seem to lie ahead. And finally addressing some of the critically important success factors as I see forging forward. By way of introduction, Bangkok Bank is Thailand's largest bank, and we have a strong ASEAN focus with a long-standing presence in 9 ASEAN countries, including Thailand and Indonesia. In Indonesia, we have Indonesian subsidiary, the so-called Permata Bank. We also have subsidiary banks in Malaysia and China, as well as branches in Hong Kong, Japan, Taiwan, the UK, and the US. We are the leading financier in the energy industry in Thailand. And many of our clients have offshore interests, not only in Southeast Asia, but also in Asia, as well as in the United States, Australia, and Europe. They are all in the process of transitioning to various forms of renewable energy, and we have been supporting them as their financial partner. I think importantly, I would like to say that Bangkok Bank's approach has always been relating to the renewable energy and ESG in a wider perspective, is that we see our role as creating and promoting customer sustainability. And our aspiration is to support customers to transform their production facilities and business model so that they can keep pace with ESG trends. And essentially, renewable energy and the ESG trend has always been a very important strategy that Bangkok Bank has been adhering to during the past many years. In Thailand and elsewhere, we are financing solar, wind, hydro, biomass, and geothermal energy developments, as well as energy storage, electric vehicles, and business transformation to more efficient energy system. During our many years of experience in financing large-scale energy projects, we have worked closely with many stakeholders, including regional authorities, environmentally, the local communities, and we have built up specialist knowledge in areas such as project finance, energy markets, transmission, risk management, and pricing. This experience is quite helpful to our clients as they transition to new energy systems, as well as to our investors. From a banking perspective, I see many areas of opportunities in the energy and ESG transition sectors, such as renewable energy, energy storage, EV, green buildings, and forest conservation. We help finance such projects not only with loans, but through the capital markets. We are the leading issuer of sustainable green, and sustainability-linked loans in Thailand. Now, let me tell you about the grave challenges that we see lying ahead. Recently, we have seen a cooling in this market as investors and developers have been concerned about high interest rates and become more risk-averse. There is also a big gap between levels of investment required for the energy transition and the financing that is thus far available, and Madam Moderator also has touched on this issue. While the JETP is a good start, the pledge is still far well short of the investment needs. Indonesia and Vietnam have signed up as partners in JETP, right, with commitments to making a transition towards equitable, sustainable energy system and more green projects. But I understand that the amount pledged only amounts to about 10 to 15% of the required transition investment. Indonesia requires around $225 billion for their energy transition, while it has received pledges of around $20 billion. Vietnam needs around $134 billion and has pledges of only $15 billion, as low as that. For Southeast Asia as a whole, it is estimated that it would require about $3 trillion in investment for the transition. We also need to take into account the social and economic needs of our countries that still need to be met. Whereas in many developed countries, they are talking about scaling down coal-fired power plants that have been operating for 40 to 50 years. But the situation here in Asia is quite different, especially Southeast Asia. Here, 80% of our power derived from fossil fuels. Many coal-fired power plants have only been operating for perhaps 10 to 15 years, and decommissioning them now would be unthinkable because it would be extremely costly in terms of investment and jobs. Consequently, although countries in our region have committed to making a transition to net zero, they are finding it difficult to meet those commitments, and fossil fuel will continue to be a very important part of the energy mix of some time to come. All this emphasizes the importance of working together closely to achieve the shared common goals. The private sector alone cannot do it. Governments and regulators also need to promote and attract financing and investments into renewable energy. Fortunately, I can see that we are having some good developments across the region. I'll give you a few. A few years ago, the Japanese government introduced guaranteed feed-in tariffs with identified power off-takers for solar power plants projects for around 20 years. And such measures undoubtedly spurred a lot of investment from local and foreign sources alike into the intended renewable projects. Another example, in Taiwan, also has recently introduced a scheme to attract investment in setting up stable energy storage. Storage is very important, not only renewable energy. Singapore, the regulator there also has introduced praiseworthy grants and subsidies for banks to engage experts and consultants to establish a green financing framework. We believe that such framework is expected to help SMEs to assess their readiness to seek green financing and identify gaps to fill, because without their readiness, then the financing may not come their way because the risk may be high. In Thailand, the government is also introducing various measures to help us reach by 2050 and net zero by 2065. A new ESG fund is about to be launched, actually has been launched just a few days ago, with tax benefits for investors The fund can invest in outstanding companies with green or ESG credentials and companies with disclosure of greenhouse gas emissions, and that support Thailand's goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The EV industry is also being encouraged with a purchase subsidy for electric vehicles until the year 2027 of up to $2,800 per car. There are also tax holidays for EV producers, manufacturers of EV components, and EV chargers producers. There is also a 50% tax deduction for companies investing in smart cities. This covers transport, energy, public services, and the environment. We can see the financial regulators in the region also in turn introducing taxonomy criteria or identifying bank exposure to fossil fuels industries and the like. As for next year, the Bank of Thailand is requiring banks to disclose their loan exposures to high fossil fuel dependent and therefore high-risk industries in line with the TCFD, or the so-called Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. The first phase of the Bank of Thailand scheme focuses on two carbon-intensive industries, namely energy and transportation, using traffic light system. Over time, disclosure about ESG will become stricter prices. This will nudge the operators into accelerating the transition so that we will all play our roles in the world critical developments. And that is my input to the forum. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I think a very clear message that for private investment or banks to come in to finance energy, you need the certainty coming from the government policies, incentives to reduce risk and reduce cost, whether it's coming from the government or I would say in the case of the JETP platform, it can also come from the MDBs and the philanthropies. So the issue is the fact that the concessionary finance or the government public funding should fund the investments that are less commercial, let's say, or non-commercial, whether it's the storage, you mentioned storage in your example, or the repurposing or the social costs. These are things that the government or the MDBs could come in, and renewable energy presumably is where the private sector could come in. And even if we can define transition finance and identify the carbon credit that can be obtained from it, that could also be another area for for banks or private investors to come in. Clear message. So now let me turn to another platform in Indonesia. So I just wanted to mention that in Indonesia, what Indonesia as a government is trying to do is, we call it lead by example, if I'm not mistaken. So, okay, it's very complex. Energy transition in any country is very complex because of I just described to you all the different components. You can imagine the political economy of trying to make that happen. So it's very complex. If you got everything right, you waited till you got everything right, it might take you a while and nothing will happen. So what the Indonesian government is trying to do is to lead by example. Let's just try to do it. So the Just Energy Transition Platform, which was just launched, the investment plans was just launched recently. We also have the Energy Transition Mechanism, which by Edwin, who is not the President Director of PTSMI, it doesn't stand for Sri Mulyani. It stands for Sarana Multi Infrastructure, which is created by the Ministry of Finance to undertake the investment projects, and they have also been assigned to be the platform for the ETM mechanism for the financing and the investment framework. So maybe if you could share the progress on the ETM and whether you actually have any successful cases that are coming. We've been waiting. We heard that there's some successful cases coming, so waiting for you to share anything you can share.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Bu Mari. I think we are not in the stage of celebrating something, yeah, with regard to the cases, because we are in the stage of, I think, developing a framework, yeah, because the framework, yeah, if you're talking about energy transition and the framework, I think it's not been tested yet, yeah. The regulation is there. I think the government has issued a presidential decree for accelerating renewable energy. MOF has also issued a kind of what would be the government support when they have to intervene, yeah, to accelerate the energy transition. But I think the point is, my point is that when we define an energy transition as an asset class, then we have to translate the narrative into a project realization. So that I think become what we call it the project gap, yeah. Because project has to be identified, project has to be structured, and it has to be fairly shared in terms of burden and resharing. And it has to come into a tender process, best accountable and transparent tender process. I think we have not yet come to that stage, yeah, to be frank, yeah. And I think what we are doing right now, yeah, there are 3 ways. First, showcase the quick win. When it comes to project, yeah, making a contractual agreement with regard to the transition asset class, so it could be quite challenging and take time. So let's start with the showcase first. Whether it's coal phase out or coal phase down, it's still developing right now because in fact, we have to negotiate with PLN and we have to negotiate with regard to the replaceable power when it comes to shortening the lifetime of the asset at the end of the day. So that become the issue, but we move on with the showcase. We support, we and GIP, I think quite representative investors, yeah, because there is INA, GIP, who represent the philanthropy, and PTSMI would form I think a consortium, and we deal with PLN with regard to the shortening life of the Cirebon asset, Cirebon PLTU. Yeah, that one is, I think, moving. Yeah, there's gonna be a signing on a COP. INA would be a representative investor who is going to sign. They are, I think, finalizing the roadmap to the amendment of PPA. I think that would become a very crucial element of what we call it, the transition asset class itself. Yeah, that's one thing, the showcase. The second thing, I think we pragmatically, because when it comes to transition asset class, who is responsible for the transitioning, yeah, electricity? I think the main central to the issue is PLN itself. I think so. On the second approach, we are trying to facilitate PLN in our capacity. Yeah, we are going to provide grant element, which is, I think, on our side coming from the European Union, because we have SDG Indonesia platform and we have the luxury to have an access to that. And it's going to be a combination of grant and loan, lending, that we are going to provide to PLN as a facilitation, yeah, for PLN to transition. And then we can set out the terms and conditions here and there. In such way, it represents a transition program for PLN. That is second thing. Important element in this facilitation is also, sorry, I think the context of the transition. So we try to make it like credible in such way it doesn't facilitate a so-called greenwashing for PLN. So we have to be quite stringent in that sense. I think the third part, I think this is something that very relevant to G-funds and private investors, I think is the PPP modality. I think because PLN has also announced their ambition to achieve net zero by introducing a color roadmap, PLN roadmap towards, Pak Darmo always mentioned about 2040, which I think the narrative is accelerated, ultra accelerated or accelerated renewable energy development rather than, the previous one, which is more towards what Bu Mari mentioned, coal phase out or coal phase down. I think on that sense, perhaps we can talk with PLN and we work very closely with PLN. Even we have formed a task force, joint task force in such way PTSMI can provide with the back of MOF, can provide a PDF, project development facilitation, so that not only a green project or renewable project, but also I think related to transition, perhaps transmission or smart grid, anything that perhaps quite difficult to conduct under the normal B2B tender process. Of course, it will require a heavy government support. Then we do it under the PDF and PPP modality, whereby there is going to be like a government fiscal support in there. So there is three approach that we are currently doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you for that really great description of how you need to bring all the different parts together. And I think your point about sustainable infrastructure, including energy transition, to be an asset class. I think that's another big topic that I know is going on. And you mentioned at the end that there needs to be public funding for this, and you mentioned the government. How about the ADB and the role of ADB and the role of maybe CIF, the Climate Investment Fund?
Yeah, ADB is very supportive and strong support to us, even in our showcase. ADB, I guess that ADB is utilizing CEF money, a part of it, and it is dedicated for the loan given to the CEP, Cirebon Power. It's really a concessional loan, very attractive. In such way, we as an investors are helped, not only to invest, but also can re-leverage the project, because the project loan has come down to the level that is really low, and it can be re-leveraged to facilitate an exit. But I think I don't want to stress the exit because it's a kind of facilitating the exit for, but yeah, I think it exit in such way. There is an element of transition, because coal phase down is really shortening the duration, the asset life, which bring the element of carbon under the taxonomy. And we are trying very hard to monetize the carbon creation, credit creation, so it can be like a fair resharing and fair sharing burden.
Thank you. I think this is hopefully going to be a good showcase. It seems to be a lot of progress, and we hope that Indonesia can lead by example. Okay, now let me turn, I'm sort of going offline, online, offline. So let me go to our next speaker. She's joining us from Beijing, I guess, Zhang Muji, I hope I pronounced that right. She is the Division Director, General Affairs Director for in the International Cooperation Department of the China Renewable Energy and Engineering Institute. And she's done extensive work on both in the industry and in the government on the renewable energy sector. And it turns out that you've been conducting research in energy transition in Southeast Asia. So perfect for you to share with us what you observe as the recent trends and outlook from the Chinese perspective, and how your experience in China. How did Chinese enterprises work with local partners to accelerate the process of transition, energy transition? Over to you, Muji.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Chair, Madam Mary, and distinguished delegates. Good morning. It's very happy to attend this forum. And just as the introduction by the chair, yes, our institute was appointed by National Energy Administration of China in 2050 to have a long-term cooperation with ASEAN countries on the clean energy sector. So based on our observation, we think that it is a very good time for ASEAN to do the energy transition, and we are providing a good market. That is because first, of course, we know that ASEAN has a very big, very good, ambitious on the energy transition. We know that excluding the Philippines, 9 out of 10 member states, ASEAN member states, has set carbon neutrality or net zero emission goals by the mid of 21st century. And of course, ASEAN, as we all know, that has a very great involvement on renewable. And of course, it will play an important role in both narrowing the power gap and providing employment. So ASEAN take very serious about renewable development in these years. And of course, the second is about, we know that the price of the supply and the cost of the whole industry chain is declining dramatically in these years. And also the regions gathered a lot of experience on how to do the energy transition and especially on the renewable energy utilization. And the third part is, I think it is a kind of injection to the ASEAN to do the renewable energy and energy transition is about the customers' requirement, because all the customers in and out of ASEAN countries take very importance on the carbon emissions decline of the products. And ASEAN is also very important producer, provider to the whole world. So I think that is also why ASEAN countries take very importance on renewable energy development. So as we all know that the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, which is the master plan for guiding the energy sector in the region, and it already going to the phase 2, and it set the targets to achieve the 23% share of renewable in total primary energy supply and the 35% share of renewable in ASEAN install power capacity by 2025. So it already set a very good targets, and it will focus on 7 key areas. The first is ASEAN Power Grid. The second is Trans-ASEAN Gas Pipeline. Third is coal and clean coal technology. The fourth is energy efficiency and conservation, and the renewable energy, regional energy policy and planning, as well as the civil civilian nuclear energy. So this key area are the priority for ASEAN country to go forward on the energy transition sector. But based on our observation and our feeling that I think ASEAN is take very importance on three important areas. The first is, of course, the renewable energy development, and the second is about the energy efficiency enhancement, and the third is about the interconnection, because it will increase the penetration of renewable energy in the whole area. So, from 2019 to 2021, we can see that the renewable energy share grew from the 30.6% to 50.4% in the total primary energy supply, and from the 29.9% to 33.6% in the installed capacity. So it is a very big growth in these years, and of course, I think not only on the target setting, but ASEAN take a very importance on the innovation or innovative applications, such as the low wind speed power and floating solar, as well as a hybrid energy utilization. And just as I mentioned, that the interconnection is also a very important part. So we have already seen a lot of good projects is booming this year. For example, the Singapore to Malaysia and to Thailand to from Laos to Thailand to Malaysia to Singapore. That is the flow. And a lot of ASEAN countries need more clean energy in the whole regions. So very big and long interconnection grid line is being being built these years. So yeah, that is our observation. But one thing I would like to emphasize that because the ASEAN, the whole member states, the 10 member states, is different in the resources endowment and employment development phases. So we think that if we take into the pathway or the transition road to go through, we cannot take ASEAN into a whole place, but we should specifically separate it, define different countries into different resources and development phases. So that is why our institute and ASEAN Center for Energy has finished the edition of the yearly joint research, the ramping up renewable energy on the low carbon transition pathway of ASEAN. We use one model to carry out the performance analysis of the ASEAN member states. It assesses each member state into three aspects, 12 indicators, which is the energy security, energy economy, as well as the energy sustainability. So it so we're using this kind of assessment to all the indicators to assess the different pathway or what is the different role that each country should go through. So yeah, for more details, I can share with the report to the organizers of the forum if you are interested about. And regarding to the second question, which Madam Marie mentioned about the Chinese enterprises, how the Chinese enterprises joining or participant in the region or give their contribution to the region. I think the most important one is to share the development experience of China in the field's practice. For example, some commercial projects and Chinese company I think should introduce some advanced technologies of Chinese and share the lessons, shares the experience or even lessons learned from China's part. For example, the low speed wind industry. I think it is a very good good way for the utilization in ASEAN country, because before that we all think that 7 meters per second is the limitation for the wind development. But right now, within our research, we think that 7 to 5, even below 5 meters per second is a very good wind speed that can use in ASEAN in the low wind speed area. So I think this kind Chinese company gathered a lot of experiments or some standards or some experiment understandings on this utilization. I think China's company should share their understanding and share their experience with our ASEAN partners together to enlarge the room of the different advanced technologies utilization ability. And the second is, of course, I think is to expand the market through cross-border trade, because we think that as I mentioned, that the interconnection is very important thing in ASEAN country in the regions these years, and I think China can also provide a very good and smooth and for sure a guaranteed electric market for our ASEAN partners to provide a smooth ability for the supplier, for the consumer. So, and also in China, we right now have a lot of green certificates and the joint cascade joint operation of hydropower station. I think this experience can share with our ASEAN partner. And the third, I think, is of course China can be a very good market to welcome the ASEAN investors or developer together with us, with Chinese company in China's market to do some a demonstration project, or make some showcase. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Efficiency, interconnection. What was the third one? Renewable, yeah. So I think those were really, and we look forward to reading your study. And obviously there's a lot of opportunity in ASEAN for interconnection and therefore, scale for the renewable. I mean, besides your example of the 100 gigawatt from Laos to Singapore, I think Singapore is opening up a bid for solar energy from Batam, yeah. And and I know a number of Indonesian companies are bidding for that. So I think this is kind of the regional component is very important, and that's why hopefully ASEAN chapter of GIP can also be participating in this increased regionalization of energy. So over to you, David von Eiff. I hope I pronounced that right. A good German name, right? Last but not least, Director for Global Industry Standards at the CFA Institute. I know you have extensive experience in environmental compliance, research, and sustainability. So your question is, you have been working to raise awareness and building capacity for the financial sector around climate transition. According to you, what roles should banks and financial institutions and investors play in facilitating this transition?
Okay, thank you very much. It's also a pleasure to be here. First time in Indonesia, so it's great to learn from you guys as well. So I think that's one of those questions that seems simple, but you could probably spend 2 days talking about, right? So we've already had some very good conversation around that, so I'll try to keep it very high level and keep it to kind of like less technical, but more kind of storytelling in a way maybe. So I think we've heard some very good things as we go, and we know there's been action on this topic. So, you know, if we look, you have 2/3 of emissions are covered by net zero pledges, and that amounts to 70 trillion in assets, which sounds good, but that still leaves quite a large gap. So that leaves about a $64 to $69 trillion financing gap globally for what we need to reach net zero. And then if we go from those pledges to actual action, that still has more of a gap, right? If we look, about 60% of companies are not on track. And I think we've heard from Dr. Ma, we heard from Mr. von Amsberg, one of the biggest problems is the length of bankable projects. But that makes it sound like there's not enough projects. But really, there's too many projects and not enough, and the funding doesn't understand them. And that's where the role of the finance industry really comes into play. Because when you have a lot of money chasing very few projects, that really affects the risk return profile that they'll go for. You know, the money can be very choosy and pick the highest return projects. But when you get to things like investing in hydrogen, investing in sustainable infrastructure, those don't have good traditional risk return. And when you use them with sustainable materials or sustainable approaches, it's even less well understood. So that becomes a big challenge for the kinds of projects that are useful here. So when I was going through my notes, I want to kind of keep it at that macro level. So I think the best thing for the finance industry is empowering stakeholders with information, and then kind of creating innovative financial tools to help meet the newer needs. And we've heard about some of them today. So I broke it down into 6 things, and instead of going through them one by one, I'm going to kind of combine them all into one big box. But you know, when you think about what it is, it's things like we've heard about. So capital allocation and investment. Then it goes to the creation of those innovative financial products, better risk management and credit facilities, using that advisory and expertise for capacity building, and influencing regulatory frameworks is especially important, and of course integrating ESG principles, which sounds very straightforward. And we've heard some of those tools today. So some of the innovative tools we've heard today are like the nature-based solutions and carbon markets and carbon pricing. And those are very good things to start with, but we could still be even more innovative there. So I'll use like the Hong Kong example. 60% of all of our electricity is used by commercial buildings. So creating kind of carbon credits around, say, building retrofitting to create more space to create financial incentive could help drive kind of investment into that category, because right now there's really no incentive to renovate your buildings. Everyone's waiting for the utility companies, but there's still a lot of efficiency, right? Because when we think about what we've heard today, we've heard renewable energy a lot, but then that gets into electrification, which then gets into kind of making optimal efficiency as well. So we're focused right now a lot on the renewable energy generation, but the next step is those hard to abate industries. And we haven't really stepped into the hard to abate industries yet. And that gets into that risk management section where we can really have a role, but also regulation. So in terms of risk management, banks and central banks can play a role by de-risking kind of the political risk, where the small and medium banks get more involved with the technological risk. Because if you think about solar energy, wind energy, we understand the risks around those pretty well. But as we expand the amount of solar we install or the wind we install, that exposes them to new risks. So you have things like we need to fix the grid, because as you get above 20% renewable energy, that puts challenges on your grid. But it also makes those projects bigger, which exposes them to natural catastrophes and other disasters as well. So our insurance industries need to catch up there. Or as we build out more renewable energy networks, there's still uncertainty around, say, transport. So if you look at heavy transport, there's a lack of investment there, say, in the European market, because everyone's wondering, is it going to be hydrogen? Is it going to be battery powered? And depending on which technological choice you go with, there's different infrastructure needs. So creating kind of valid roadmaps for those sectors to pick is a very important aspect of what finance should be doing and helping them guide, like which technologies are we going to be investing in, and that helps create that de-risking approach. but that also requires capacity building. You know, if and as part of my work, I've got to go to quite a lot of countries that are getting involved in this, and they want to do things like green loans and green mortgages. But how do you do green loans and green mortgages when you don't have, say, green building standards? Or you want to have carbon pricing, but you don't have strong environmental regulations. So pollution is almost free. So for example, there was a company I was talking to that works in cement, and they want to lower the carbon footprint of cement production. And they want to use coal fly ash, which would be a waste product in most countries. However, there's no water regulations there, so the coal power plants are just throwing the ash in the water. So they have to actually pay the coal-fired power plants to collect it, which makes it a cost versus a savings. So those kinds of legal frameworks, finance can help by guiding regulators on what do we need to see to make these projects affordable, which goes to things like carbon pricing. And we all know we need carbon pricing, and maybe your companies might not be ready for it, so you can do things like mandating internal carbon pricing to help get that going. Or you can mandate that your banks do climate risk and stress testing, which then makes green buildings look more attractive, because regular buildings, when you price in climate risk, would lower their value. So a building that's more climate resistant would necessarily have a higher value, and that kind of affects a bank's climate risk profile as well. So those are areas that are good. Just want to be conscious of time. So, I think those are good places to start. Integration of ESG principles is important, but even there's still the discussion of, do you want to do ESG integration for risk management, or do you want to do ESG integration for sustainable approaches? And those are two different things, and therefore the products that they create would be different things. So making sure you're having good disclosure about what exactly a project's goals are is very important. So that gets again to capacity. Like, do you have the capability to discuss your projects and communicate them? And have you really trained your workforce? So like Dr. Ma's CASI project will be very important in generating that kind of basic level of knowledge. So when we say we're talking about a transition project, we know what we're talking about. And that would be good for driving funding that way, I guess. As we mentioned before, there's already that funding gap. But if you look at, say, green bonds, you have $1.6 trillion of green bonds issued in 2021, but only $4.4 billion in transition bonds. And that gets into those worries, like you mentioned, about greenwashing. Transition tends to carry that greenwashing stigma. And we need to make sure people understand what is a valid transition project? How do I set metrics and targets? What even are valid metrics and targets? Like, what is SBTI? A lot of people probably don't really know. Because if you look at SBTI, we have 60, like I mentioned before, 2/3 of all emissions covered by net zero pledges, but only 2,000 net zero pledges have gone through SBTI, which means there's just a lack of awareness. So there's a lot of work left to be done there.
Okay, thanks a lot, David. I'm afraid because today's Friday, we do have to, I cannot go for a second round of questions much as I would like to. We do have to end because of the Friday prayers. So I would like to just end this panel. I think we've had a really good round of viewpoints indicating how complex energy transition is, but there were some good ideas here. The importance of sharing of information, capacity building, and some really good ideas about the areas. And I think I like the way you put it. Yes, we have lack of bankable and transformative projects, but there are lots of projects out there, but just the financial sector doesn't understand them. So our challenge is, how do we make them, how do we bridge that understanding gap? It is about sharing of information, capacity building, and a whole lot of, I think, some of very localized cases, right? Because every country is different. So understanding the situation in every country is also going to be a key to us understanding all to be able to move forward. So I'm going to close this session, and then I'm going to go immediately to closing our whole 1.5 days of seminar, and I will invite also Dr. Ma to add to any thing that I missed in my closing remarks. So bear with me just 2-3 minutes, Pa Edwin and Pa David, and those of you also online, thank you. Maybe a round of applause first for our panelists. So I'm not going to attempt to summarize. Let me just hit a few highlights of our 1.5 days. And first of all, I think I just cannot get those words of Dr. Ma out of my mind. We need more money. We need to mobilize more money. That's really what emerging markets are all about. And we know that there is a financing gap. And for us, and I think the green investment principles and the way we also see the ASEAN chapter, we should be focusing on how it benefits people and development. It has to be people-centered. And we know the other problem that keeps on cropping up is the lack of pipeline of bankable projects and bankable and transformative projects. And I think David provided us with a good segue into that issue, that there's lots of projects out there. It's just that the financial sector doesn't understand how to make them bankable and transformative. And that's where I think I'm going to repeat your 5 points from yesterday, Dr. Ma, which is a lot of our discussions in the 1.5 days has been around that. It's about the frameworks. It's about the taxonomy. You don't want to have hundreds of taxonomy, but every country, every regulator will create their own taxonomy. But at least in ASEAN, how do we at least frame it with the ASEAN taxonomy, sustainable taxonomy in mind, but adjusted to our local conditions? And you also mentioned CGT. I mean, we can aspire, I think we should always be looking at CGT when we are designing our taxonomy, for instance. Second, disclosure. Third, the range of products, so the range of innovative financial innovations that need to be out there. We heard some of it from the examples today. And how to have policies, incentives to reduce cost and risk. I think this is really the crux. And actually, I recall Dr. Maya yesterday, you said, and I think it did come up just then, Edwin's example of how as an investor, you were really helped with the ADB and CIF money to reduce the cost and be able to refinance and leverage. So the interest subsidy, I think that you mentioned yesterday, you thought that was kind of, besides guarantees and all that, was one of the best instruments because it does draw on the basis of already the risk framework of the investors or of the banks. So I think that this, how to reduce cost and risk, this is going to be a continued discussion, and whether it's the government, whether it's how do we have the sharing of cost and sharing of the burden of the risk and so on. And finally, most importantly, is the capacity building, training, sharing of information for all the stakeholders, starting with the government, local government. I think I like the example of Dr. Ma. We should involve local governments more because the projects are there at the local level, and also the regulators and the investors and the financial institutions, and of course those who provide services like the assessors, the ones who create standards or verify the standards and so on. So those are some of my highlights, and I just want to thank Dr. Ma as well as the CSIS and his team, Chenglin, Yunhan and Leo, and also the CSIS team who I understand they couldn't sleep for 2 nights, the last 2 nights, worrying about this event. Nadia, Marsha, Novi, and Arisa. Thank you so much. A big round of applause for them. And let me give the final word to Dr. Ma in closing.
Maybe I'll just stand here. First of all, big congratulations again to the launch of the GIP ASEAN chapter. We agree the name is ASEAN rather than Southeast Asia to be easier to remember. And again, big thanks to Ibu Mari and Park Donnie for taking the leadership to drive this GIP regional chapter. Now, I'd like to just to see a few words on some of the key issues that came up. One is this massive demand for financing and the perception of lack of financing. Yesterday we heard a lot of talk on 200-something billion, that's needed in Indonesia, and I said to Mary that this is underestimated. We may have actually a few times bigger number, according to my experience, because I used to do that for China, and the energy guys come up with a small number, and I said it's going to be 3 times bigger. In fact, my number was right. So it actually reinforces this need for closing the financing gap. And I think there's 3 reasons why we have a huge demand, but not enough of materialized or financed demand. One is what I call information asymmetry. There's a green money. You know, the banks want to provide green loans and so on. There are green projects which are bankable already, but they don't know each other. So what we do is to actually match them, right? This is actually relatively easy, which, you know, we, GIP, can do some of these. The second thing is really the lack of bankable green projects. Some projects are green, but they're not bankable yet because they're not making money. And they cannot repay the loans and repay the interest and all that. And for that, we need to do a lot. For example, government incentives. If the government can offer, you know, low-cost funding, MDB can offer some concessional financing, the government can provide interest subsidy, then it helps to enhance the profitability of these projects and driving green capital flows from the private sector. Of course, capacity is another piece of this bankability. For example, the transition projects, like a steel, cement, petrochemical company wants to decarbonize, but if they don't know how to do the transition plan, they won't get the money, right? So helping them to do the transition plan is another way of enhancing bankability. The third reason is a lack of green money. You know, the financial system here in developing countries, emerging markets, actually have a lot of money, a lot of deposits and capital markets, fundraising capability, but the internal staff within the banks actually don't know how to make them into green loans and green bonds. They don't know the standards, they don't know disclosure, they don't know how to guide the clients, and they don't know how to help the clients to prepare projects. That means we have a lot of non-green money, but not enough green money. And that's where the capacity building for financial institutions is needed. So I think 3 efforts, you know, matching and enhancing bankability of projects and enhancing capacity of the financial institutions will be the solution to address this issue of closing the gap. The second topic is on transition finance, which you know, Mary shared with a lot of details already on the ground. But I'd like to highlight once again this G20 transition finance framework, which was developed by the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group that I co-chaired last year, and under the leadership of the Indian presidency of the G20. So this was an important document which essentially summarizes all the best practices globally and you know, put them into very high-level guidance for each jurisdiction. And I think the 5 points mentioned in the G20 framework is actually really worth studying by our financial institutions, by the regulators, and so on. Now, let me just very, very briefly say the 5 points. Number 1, we need a way to identify transition projects, which in our case, for example, China and many emerging markets, a transition taxonomy. And Singapore has done this, and I think many other countries here probably need to do that. It's a list of activities that can clearly be seen by the financiers and by the project owners, that these are the these are the credible transition projects we should go for. Second one is on disclosure, especially disclosure of transition plan by the company. So we actually need to make effort to help the company to prepare transition plan and disclose them. And thirdly, it's of course many products, including the sustainability linked products, which will provide internal incentive within the products to help driving the decarbonization. Because if they decarbonize fast, they get a lower interest. That's what's built into the product, right? And the fourth element is the policy incentive, which will make the transition projects more bankable. And finally, need to pay attention to just transition, meaning we should guide the finances and companies to actually assess the impact on employment at the same time assessing financial feasibility and the decarbonization benefits. And if the assessment is that they are going to lay off a lot of people, then something has to be done to retrain these people and providing opportunity for them to get job elsewhere. So these are the 5 points in the G20 framework for transition, which I think is worth reading and help guiding our work. And finally, just 1 point on how China can help, which is a question Mary raised to the Chinese lady.
And I just give you one example which China can help now, in addition to some of the projects already being financed by Chinese lenders. That's the Chinese panda bond market. The Chinese domestic bond market is now a place where you can raise cheaper money than the US dollar. Why? Because the Chinese interest rates are like 2 to 3 percentage points lower than the US rates. And I heard that 100 billion RMB worth of panda bond issuance was done recently in China by foreign entities trying to raise money. And what I can suggest that if we can organize some of the issuers from ASEAN country, from Indonesia, and issue panda green bond in China using CGT as a label. That would be ideal. I think making sure it's green, internationally recognized, and also getting access to cheaper financing from China. So now once again, following Mary, I'd like to thank the organizers, especially CSRC and our ICF's team for the huge amount of work devoted to this conference and for organizing the ceremony. And I look forward to all of you to continue participating and supporting the GIP work, especially for the ASEAN chapter going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again to Dr. Bumari and the rest of the panel. Just some housekeeping announcements for anyone who's going to go to Friday Prayer. We have one place 2 minutes away at Wisma Purna Batara, just down the road. We also have lunch available outside the function room. And once again, thank you so much for attending the 2 days forum, and we look forward to welcoming you all back in another CSIS or GIP event. Thank you.